Alright, here we have a tissue foil crane that I lacquered the paper before folding. This is a test to see how water resilient it'll be being lacquered and then folded versus folded and then lacquered. This test is just the lacquered then folded tissue foil. A few notes: the tissue foil was definitely a little different to fold, to say the least, with the lacquer on beforehand. The creases that it took were sharper, but I have a feeling if I were to need to reverse the creases a lot more, it would have stressed the paper more. The paper, when doing like the spread for the crane here in the center, was much more resistant to shaping, but once shaped, held the shape better. So, what I want to see though is also the paper was a little bit thicker. So I would imagine, this is just a crane, so you can see kind of, it's still pretty thin, but it definitely had a feel of being thicker. So I'd imagine if doing certain complex models, it may not be ideal to lacquer and then fold the complex model. It may make more sense to lacquer after. It might just depend on the model. But we're going to do some tests here. So we'll turn on some water. I have it plugged so I can do a submersion test. So first, let me just get a lighter stream so no waste water. Use as much as I need. We're going to test just to run off first. I'm just going to get it wet and see how the paper runs off. Now note, tissue foil is made with a water reversible glue. The last test I did, the lacquered foil paper the glue did not reverse off easily. It did not come undone. That was with a paper folded in half and then rabbit-eared, like a strip of paper, just some scrap. Here I'm doing a full model. So it's going to be a little different. You can see the water is beading off the paper, but I'm again just more curious how it's going to. I also kind of want to get the water in sort of like those grooves and see how it looks. Yeah, it's running right off. Get the water out of the inside of the model because it's actually filling up the inside there a little. And very soon it'll be the submersion test. So far it's looking pretty promising. The water is just kind of beading off. Paper is staying relatively dry. Note the lacquer was sprayed on last night. It's midday today. So I might have even better results if I let it cure longer. The lacquer is no longer smelly, so it's not fuming. But it hasn't cured for a week. Usually a week, I think, is how long this spray lacquer needs to cure for full resilience. So if I were to put alcohol on this, it might not have been fully cured and it would affect it. But yeah, you can see here, just getting it wet. I'm waiting for enough water to be formed for a submersion test. Again, so far, no separation on the paper, so we're good there. I'm really curious to do a submersion test. I think we almost have enough water in it to do a submersion test for a bit. That's more what I'm curious about. So let's get enough water I can do a submersion here. So submersion test 1. I can feel the paper is just with that amount of water. I think some water is getting into the tissue foil through the creases, but it's not too bad yet. I don't see separation and it's still beading. So we're gonna just submerge it for a little bit. I want to pull it out and see if the model is able to dry and be okay. This is nice to see though. If I took this out in the rain, I would not be nearly as worried. As long as I got it inside and dry shortly after, I would not expect any damage. So now we're going to do a submersion test. It's fully submerged. I'm going to start by holding it there just for a few seconds and pull it out and see what happens. This is also non-bleeding tissue foil, so it should not have any dyes coming loose. Just nice, because otherwise this water would start to discolor. Okay. I think that's long enough for a good test. So now let's see how that looks. Water is still beating off nicely. You can see the very center softened a bit, but not too bad. The water just kind of runs off. I want to also see here, last time I got it this wet, without a submersion, just rubbing my finger against the area where the foil meets the paper caused it to separate. So I'm curious if after that submersion, if enough water got into that seam for the glue to have come loose. So let's test that. Nope, it's not rubbing off. Keep in mind, the last test, it would have rubbed right off the tissue paper from the foil. And it's not rubbing off there. So that's good to see. Just gonna resubmerge and see what happens. This is already pretty impressive. Most origami, if you were to submerge it like this, it would be ruined pretty quickly. Also, it floats, which is kind of cool. But let's keep it submerged. So this would be really cool if you had like an origami boat, for example. But yeah, that looks good. And this is beating right off. So I think that is a good thing. I might start lacquering my models more frequently, and then just do that. That's, I think, a very decent way to protect a model. I'm also have a few models where I'm going to just lacquer after the folds and see, because if you, for example, if I took this crane and I lacquered it without having lacquered in advance, I'd be able to fold more stuff out of it, but things like the inside of the wing may not be protected because the spray lacquer will not have been able to get in. So I'm curious. Yeah, it's very promising.